Yes, ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for joining us for this latest episode of Big Brother's Big Archive. My name's Carl Bainbridge, and joining me as ever, my co-host, Mr. Carl Dutton.
Hello.
And Mr. Paul Barron.
Hello, I've come back from the dead.
Just like Big Brother. Probably because of all the Viacom rumours. But yes, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. And today we're going to be discussing the most recent series of Big Brother, which was Celebrity Big Brother 14, which was held in the August of this year, just after Big Brother 15. And in my opinion, was a very strong series. Lads, do you have any views on it?
It had Gary Busey.
And that's enough to please you.
Again, it had Gary Busey. End of. You put the man in any sort of reality TV show situation, you're going to get gold.
And certainly we'll be discussing more about Gary Busey as the series goes on. But I'm really looking forward to talking about Celebrity 14 because, as well, we'd had Celebrity 13 and there was this real feeling from a lot of people of the expectation coming into 14 because 13 was really well received, really arguably one of the best celebrity versions of them all. And bit of a strong statement, I think 14 runs it really, really close. It's definitely a top tier run for me.
I think that people just wanted a new series. I think people were tired of the group from the summer because I think it had just been kind of a sort of a dark atmosphere the entire summer. People were like, oh, thank God, let's just get back to some fresh faces and enjoy this show kind of thing. Let's have some laughs. Little did we know, apparently there's something in the water this year where, I mean, it made for great entertainment in some cases, but I think for some reason there was something in the water that was making everybody in the house, A, ill, because we had another person leaving due to illness, and B, argue. I don't know what happened.
If they turned into zombies, that would have made the show a little bit more entertaining to watch.
I don't think production had anything to do with Frenchie, let's put it that way.
I was afraid if someone actually lit that woman on fire, she would have probably melted into a puddle.
I have to be honest, I'm quite a big Frenchie fan, so that's going to be an interesting thing to discuss as we go on. But we are discussing Celebrity 14. And the first thing we're going to be discussing about is something which was just sort of touched on, which was, once again, we bring up this argument every single year, the second Celebrity series in the summer.
Yeah.
Completely necessary, made for a good show. But I think that they'd care more about the summer series and not kind of at the end have this feeling of, let's hurry up and get this over with so we can get some celebrities in here feel to it. I think if the summer series stood on its own, I think they'd do more and they'd have more production budget to make the summer series really something. So again, this year we were glad for it, but if they'd put the time and effort into the summer series that they used to, then we wouldn't feel like that.
I totally agree. But I think as well, I think it's very telling because this is the third year that we've done the second summer series. And I think the first two times that they've done it, they didn't really work. And I think a large part of that was because the civilian versions before them were still quite strong. I think this one worked though because a lot of things you touched on because Civilian 15 was so badly received and so negative. There was a lot of people like myself who just wanted any sort of Big Brother just to try and erase a lot of that bad feeling from the civilian version.
Yeah, but when you're taking away something that is supposed to be for the British public, you're just making it feel a bit more, cheap and fake. You take
everything
example,
about the show now is cheap and fake. That's
well, it's Channel 5, what do you expect?
That's the problem.
Yeah, probably going into family fortune syndrome. They didn't do any civilian ones, but yet celebrities.
Yeah.
I do think there is a real shift towards celebrity culture, and I think maybe shifting towards the celebrity version is more of an example of that. But I don't know. I agree with Carl. The civilian version should always be the central part of the show, and I don't think that's the case anymore.
It used to be that the summer version was the show, and the celebrity version was the extra added bonus thing. Now it's kind of switched. I think it's because they want the ratings that I'm a Celebrity is getting and things like that. So,
well, because the fact that you get to take the most annoying celebrity that you know and dip them in cockroaches. Need I say more?
Yeah, well, we've had that added to this show now, haven't we? Every
Yeah.
year.
There we go.
But we are going to be moving on to launch night, and we're going to start first of all with the cast assessment. And Paul sort of touched on it there, where I think one of the first things we have to really talk about is Gary Busey, because Gary had done the rounds on the reality TV circuit for years. He'd been one of the people who I'd wanted in the cast for a long time, and you have to say he really did deliver.
Oh yeah.
He was off his nut, obviously. I mean, you know, obviously the drugs and the car crash and the brain damage and the being dead for however long, it just added to this concoction of the moment he came out and he was saying, Emma, no, you've got to ask me 2 questions. Like, no, I did ask you 2 questions. And then she had to walk him up the stairs and guide him into the... You were like, oh my God. This is going to be something. And he's obviously not all there. At the start, I was starting to question as to whether he was mentally well enough to go in that house. I mean, we all know that the psychology team on the Channel 5 here are not...
non-existent.
Yeah, so I was just thinking, you know... Should he really be in there? You know, when he's kind of a, and I guess that was an argument with some of the people in there that they shouldn't feel like a carer because they put somebody in there that's unable. But at the same point, I think as we get into what happened with the series, he was brain damaged and he was deaf, and I think that people didn't appreciate that. I think a lot of people treated him like he was doing it deliberately, like he was faking it, which he wasn't, obviously.
And certainly we will be discussing Gary in a lot more detail, but another thing I want to discuss about that whole cast was, it really highlighted for me there's been a real shift in how the celebrity cast is put together, because I always felt with the Channel 4 era, and arguably some of the early Channel 5 celebrity versions as well, it was all about trying to get the biggest names that they could. Bigger names equal more star power, equal higher ratings in that theory. But I think after the Spidey and Ryland series, where the bigger names, the Frankie Dettoris, the Trisha Penroses, etc., didn't deliver, there was almost this shift, in my opinion, where Channel 5 deliberately said to themselves, we're going to sacrifice a little bit of star power to make sure we get people who deliver on television.
And they've used the celebrity label as, let's get people who were insane on other reality shows and put them in there and let them be insane on our show. So they've got that element. They always have one big American star now. So that's kind of, Gary's kind of the equivalent of, obviously, we had a couple of years ago, the Reservoir Dogs guy.
Madsen.
Yeah. So
thou shalt not forget the name of Michael fucking Madsen.
Yeah, I know. I just did. But obviously he's put in there for that reason. But I can't imagine the production didn't see how out of it he was, and be like, oh, this is going to be gold. So they knew what they were doing, both him and Frenchie, and then of course Leslie. We'll get to him. I don't know whether they thought that maybe he was what he came off as originally, like he was just going to be this kind of nice, old, camp gay guy. But maybe they knew how wild and he could get as well.
I'm looking forward to discussing Leslie, because I think he's a really underappreciated character in the CBB canon. But another thing I want to talk about the big controversial casting choice of that group, and that's Dee.
Oh yeah, benefits woman.
She'd literally been on TV like a month before. Yeah.
It's just, it is basically summing up friggin' how these things are going to go out. I mean, you know, it's going to be like the prison thing. What are you famous for? I did a couple of movies. What are you famous for? Benefits.
Yeah, for me, I think if you take Dee from this series and you take Zoe from the civilian series and switch them around, they'd be in the right order.
Yes. Because, in my opinion, there was a lot of people who were really upset about Dee being cast, but I don't think it was so much about Dee herself as a person, which people had a problem with. It was giving her the label of being a celebrity.
Yeah, because again, it's like Zoe, the thing that they said the reason they put her in the civilian series was because she wasn't famous enough anymore. but she was still on the West End. She's still famous, and she's more in the public eye and is known by more people than Dee is. I think they were trying to be topical, and they were trying to get people who were in the headlines now and people cared about now, rather than, oh yeah, there's that person from the reality show 10 years ago kind of thing.
I'm just waiting for a full blown meltdown in the house. The one meltdown that actually just says, right, that's enough. Show's over.
Well, it was crazy in that all the people that we thought were going to be the nice people probably would have been. Like, maybe, I mean, Leslie obviously was aggravated by Frenchie, but, the Dees and the Georges and that, probably, and Stephanie even, might have been loved characters more than they were had they not had Gary in there. And I think that Gary just brought out a side of them that made them all look bad.
Yeah. You sort of just mentioned there with the topical thing, because I totally agree with the sentiment. Dee didn't deserve to be considered a celebrity, but you have to remember Benefit Street was absolutely massive when it was on earlier this year. I mean, everybody was talking about it. It got good ratings. There were even political discussions in the House of Commons over the benefit system on the back of the show. So I understand from production's point of view why Dee was cast. To be honest, the casting choice that annoyed me more was George, because George's claim to fame is watching the television.
Oh yeah, he was the dude off Goggle Box, wasn't he?
Yeah. I mean, we watch the television all the time. We're not considered famous, are we?
Well, yeah, I think he was just one of those talking heads on there that got famous. Funny thing was it was with Channel 4, and Channel 4 immediately, as soon as he went on Big Brother, were like, yeah, no. Yeah. I mean, the official reason was that he was now too famous to be on the show, which is hilarious, because he's... but because he went in a celebrity series, but... There's a little bit of sour grapes there, isn't there? There's a little bit of, oh, you're going to go on the show that we used to own, are you? Yeah, goodbye.
And you didn't have to cut me off. As he walks away into the background.
Like, what's he going to do with his life now? He's going to have to go back to normal, isn't he? He's not going to get any press or,
No, he's not going to get all that. But mind you, he's going to with all the publicity he's going to make. I think I know what he's going to be.
Well, you start to realise in his case as to why people choose not to do these shows, because really he had a stable job of he could have had a couple more seasons on that show. A couple more series, sorry. I'm talking in American speak, but yeah, he could have had a couple more series with that show, but now he had a one-time payoff, which may have been good, but, that's going to last him now for all the time that he could have had on that show with his family, you know what I mean?
And then they bought a new TV. You can just imagine them. Screw you all, I'm famous. This is my child now. This is my child. He's just rubbing himself on the TV, like that.
Yeah. We're going to move on, though. I'm going to move on to our launch night task. We get one every year, and let's be honest, they're all as much of a muchness. And this year, it was the Duchess of Solihull task.
Oh yeah, I remember that. I was there when I watched this one.
Yeah. And do you have any sort of opinions on it, Paul?
Right. Having an actual Duchess in the Big Brother house, and the task was they failed if they recognised her. Was a bit of an actual sort of. I'm not going to say it was actually a pretty clever thing to do, really.
Well, because the idea was that the Americans wouldn't recognise it, because the Americans wouldn't know how shit this show's reputation is, that would never, ever happen, ever. But it was a fun tasking concept. It was well done on the night. I think Dee completely failed at it miserably, though. I think there's, 2 seconds after she was in, she was speaking. I mean, I know she was supposed to be this wild child, but she didn't even attempt to do an accent.
I love the fact as well that the Dee's whole story for herself was that she was this wild child, rebel, royal. And yet, I was just thinking when she was mentioning all these descriptions of herself, I was just thinking, isn't that Fergie?
Well, yeah, she was like, oh, it's fine when I get up in the morning if my hair's normal, as long as I put extensions in later in the day. It's like, but people, they've already seen.
I know. You just have to.
I don't know. I just think that the idea of it being her was fun. That maybe somebody who would have tried a little harder, it might have been better.
I think if it lasted any longer, I think I would have been sick of it. But because it was only 2 days, it was all over by then.
I know, but
again,
that's kind of my problem with I mean, it's all a riff on the Chantel thing, which I think was the best version of it, and they just kind of, I don't know, they try and recapture that every time after that, which is really what this series is now, isn't it?
Yeah.
What really the series is, what really the show is.
Yeah.
You know, you just see that bloody...
It's like, oh yeah, I remember it's a version of a task that was successful once, yeah.
And we'll just keep repeating it over and over and just try and recapture that magic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like 3D Disney films. Like 3D Disney films.
Yeah. And from one oddball Disney animated character to another, we talk about Gary Busey, and especially the early stages of Gary's time in the house, and particularly James's treatment of him in those early stages, because I don't follow Strictly Come Dancing as much as the next person. I wish we had Joe here because he's more the Strictly expert, but I never expected James to be that much of an antagonist that early on.
I think it's because of the fact he recognised him, didn't he? Or something like that, no?
Well, of course everybody recognised him, but I think it's, he was condescending, he was arrogant, he overreacted to, like, Gary would say a tiny thing, and he'd be like, I mean, don't get me wrong, the way that it came across is there could have been stuff that was edited out of the show, but at the same time, the way that James came across, not only but when he came out of the house, the way that Stephanie came across as well, on the final night, you kind of realise, okay, maybe these people's word isn't worth as much as what they're saying. So, yeah, I think, it's down to the fact that he started it, everybody else jumped on. It was Gary's, and don't get me wrong, there was times where Gary was a complete and utter prat, and he was really terrible and rude to those people, but at the same time, majority of the time he wasn't, and they overreacted to the littlest things, and were just always on him, and you may as well just have wrote winner on him at that point. That's just how this show goes. And again, it brought out a bad side of everybody, where because he was like this, and they were saying things like, oh, I don't like to have to repeat myself to him all the time. It's like, yeah, but it's you
He's
make
a 70-year-old man with hard even.
They made it sound like he had a choice, like he was doing it deliberately, choosing not to listen to them. Like, no, he's deaf. You know, he can't help that. You've got to work with him that, and they all kind of seem like I think I heard words of them saying, I can't be bothered to basically put in the extra effort to work with him, and it was like, wow. Just again, this
is why aliens have not visited us yet, because we're all bastards.
Well, again, it's like in any other series, these people could have been nice characters because most of them were nice people. It's just a lot of the time they were just ganged up on him and just didn't understand the extent of the damage and the hearing problems, and just wasn't willing to repeat a couple of sentences a couple of times just to, help him out a little bit. They'd rather go and bitch about it and be like, oh, how dare, did you hear what he said to me? Stop! I wish he'd stop saying what. It's like he's saying what because he can't hear.
I think the big thing that really alerted to me, and we'll sort of, especially later on in the show, bring it up, there was that whole thing about the British way of behaving, and that was one thing that James, especially in the United States, really tried to hammer into Gary, was that you wouldn't behave like that in this country. You might be able to get away with that in America, but not over here.
James had this bizarre thing with that, didn't he? He was like, we don't talk like that in this country, we're not like this in that country. Or it was kind of like saying Americans are loud and abrasive, but we're not, as he's being loud and abrasive.
Do you think a lot of that maybe stemmed from the fact that in the previous celebrity versions of the show, the Americans had always been shown as the antagonists?
No, I think James kind of thought that the British people will be on his side because he's British. Okay.
Yeah, but on the other hand, the main reason why we're just one, law away from being America, and that's the gun law. And to be honest,
yeah, that's just it, isn't it? There's no real differences. There's difference in the the Bible Belt. There's difference in the gun laws, a few things like that. But in terms of comparing, London to New York, the majority of the people, there's not that much difference. And him making out like, oh, you can't speak like that here, as he's being rude himself. Just James.
He frustrates me, James, because I'll admit this. There's sometimes when I want to like James, because I do like a good villain on a show, but he made it really difficult for me. But we'll talk about that in a bit more detail as we go on. Other things that happened during those first weeks, we had the agency shopping task, which was a good bit of light-hearted fun, I felt.
That was fun. It was when things were still, it was where Frank and all that got to have, and Leslie got to have the fun side of them come out, rather than what would happen later, where they became the overly negative characters.
But also, you would not notice that the two of them actually knew each other, so it's a bit weird.
Which two were those? I'm guessing Audley and Kelly.
That's the one.
Yeah, and that's a relationship I'm really looking forward to discussing that. But as you mentioned before there, we did get this really...
I hope not. As one... Oh, sorry.
I'm actually really looking forward to talking about that, because I think it's definitely one of the more complex relationships we've had in Big Brother. But you just mentioned it there. We had this really fun side to Leslie very early on in the show, and I think he sort of delivered on what production were expecting him to be, which was the happy camp gay figure. And that all comes to an end when Frenchie destroys his shorts.
Oh my god. Someone call the fucking fire department. Someone call the army. Leslie's shorts have been destroyed.
Oh, good lord. This was one of the highlights. There was 3 days here where it was just like argument after argument after argument, and it just kept getting worse, and it was like, oh my god, what the hell has happened? You thought this was going to be the fun one, but, the arguments were just, especially with Frenchie, it just became so, it was the complete opposite of the arguments for the other series. For the majority of the time, they were just entertaining because she was so over the top with it. Everybody was moaning at her for being loud, so she just bounced up and down.
Loud.
Over the top. Her whole entire body's over the top.
She was just doing it to annoy everybody, and she would have been hell to live with, and then she destroyed the food, and she cut up his short, and it was just like, yes, that is terrible, and everything she's doing is terrible, but it's just so over the top, and just so, oh my god, I cannot believe she's doing that, and then Leslie would just, just went absolutely berserk as well, and their argument was just the most, again, it was like science almost, it was so over the top, but so hilarious at the same time.
But then again, what made it better as well was because, yes, Frenchie was this ridiculous over-the-top character, but Leslie was as well.
He was fun, but I think when he argued, he went too far, and I think especially the argument with Gary and then this one as well, I think he had a nasty tinge to it. Frenchie, you could tell that obviously she was angry, and, but part of it was her playing up to the cameras, and you could tell. Leslie just seemed like he was really out for the jugular in those arguments. And there was
there was that infamous line where he screams out to her, "Stinking French slut!"
Yeah, and especially it went way too far, but it looked like he was about to hit her. It was like, oh my god.
Yeah.
No offense, but judging from the fella, I'm guessing, a punch is basically, like a nerd, flailing his arms towards a bully,
Yeah, but she is a a woman, and a skinny woman at that. But again, it's just a kind of, you thought he was going to be this lovable camp guy, and he was so angry and so nasty, and he got so nasty, and then he would come out and he'd be like, he'd go into the diary room and go, "Oh, that's not me. My mother didn't raise me to be like that. I'm sorry." And then he'd go down and do it again. And somebody would say something to him, and you could see it like he'd be normal, and somebody would say something to him, and then he'd go, all of a sudden he'd fly off the handle and go, "Ah!" and start pointing, and...
No.
Well, what I love as well...
I think you got the interpretation wrong. It's not... It's basically...
Yeah.
But what I love as well about Leslie, one of the great things I liked about his character though, was you could tell he'd never watched the show because he just takes things far too seriously for his own good.
Yeah.
He's talking about how people have got to go, or my life is in danger.
Can I be assured that I won't get stabbed?
Stuff like that. You really forget just how big of a character Leslie was in those early days of the show.
Yeah, him and Frenchie made the show. Him, Frenchie, and Gary at that point were just like, oh my god, these people, this is actual madhouse.
They've listened to the fan base. We've got nutters.
Well, yeah, it was as the Apprentice always said, it was crazy good.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. Other things that happened, we also had the Audley and James disagreements and the sort of underlying Audley versus James feud that continued throughout the series.
Are you seriously shitting me? Dude, he could basically punch you and then let your organs travel while he was punching you.
Well, it's the Big Brother house. He knew he couldn't do that. I think that, was part of the thing, wasn't it? It was James being like, well, I was the bullied gay guy at school, so I'm going to prove that I'm not scared. I'm not scared by this. Well, no, he's not gay. He's got a wife, but he was he was the dancer and things like that, so he was always kind of sort of felt oppressed for.
I think there was a real alpha sort of one-upsmanship between the two. I think that was one of the things that fueled it, because Audley was so alpha in the way.
Yeah, and I think James was like, just because and he even said it, just because you're a boxer doesn't mean I'm scared of you. And it's like, he never said you were. But then Audley where he overreacted to things as well, and it was just, but Audley was far more sensible about it. James would get so worked up about it.
Mind you, the one thing I most remember about the Audley versus Audley versus James disagreements was Gary trolling them in the shower. Because there was this great moment, I don't think it ever made the highlights show, but it was on a bit on the side, where they were talking through their issues with each other in the bathroom. And Gary was in the shower at the time.
Yeah.
And all the two of them, they're like talking very casually. Gary just steps out the shower absolutely stark, as just had this big grin on his face as his wife gets still.
Fucking hell. That image alone would scare kids at the night time. Jesus.
But the face as well was just a total troll face as well. Great comedy moment.
It's just, oh god, it's in my head. Hey, I'm Gary Busey.
Sounds more like Leslie.
That sounded more like Leslie, I have to say, Paul.
I'm shit with my Gary Busey thing. At least we're not going for the Family Guy one. I mean, Hi, I'm Gary Busey. How are you today? Fine, doing good. Okay.
I've never been the biggest lover of Family Guy, but they got them pretty much spot on, to be honest.
See, you did like the clip. So, anywho.
Yes.
As we trundle on.
I'm sorry, everybody. I'm trying with the love in my heart to try and change for all of you. And
Hi, I'm Gary Busey. Oh god. Sorry.
Yeah, and we move on to our next task, which is our first the real nomination twist, and that was the scrap heap. And again, it really shows how big of a character Leslie was, where he's voted the star of the show at that point. And he, over the weeks, gets the chance to put up certain people and send them to the scrap heap. Originally it was Gary and Frenchie, and David and James came there. And then a contrived Big Brother twist, Frenchie saves herself with a save and replace, and Claire ends up going up. Did you like the concept of the scrap heap?
It was the most twisty twist kind of production manipulation one of the series. It worked to stir the pot initially. It got the drama they wanted it to get, so for them it was a success. It was another case for me of, wait, aren't they supposed to stay in that bedroom the entire night? Like,
They were supposed to, but as far as I know, Gary never did.
Yeah, they deliberately never showed whether he actually slept there. Frank was put there, but then never actually stayed there. I think you just kind of, they just showed him in the normal bedroom without any explanation, and there was a lot of that going on, and it was just like, yeah, but didn't you say, oh, whatever. Like, it's like, they say one thing, they don't stick to the rules, they don't actually do it, they edit the highlight show to make you think that they do, even though they don't, and it's just like, this is why I don't care anymore.
Yeah, and it eliminates that trust that the viewers have in the producers, to be honest with us.
If it's something you can't do, don't do it.
Exactly.
Like stepping on a landmine, shaped like Gary Busey.
I love what goes on in your head sometimes, Paul.
Yeah, I wish I could see that too.
Yeah. But we come round to our first eviction of the season, and we have, after Frenchie saves herself, we have Claire, David, Gary, James, and Kelly nominated. And I don't think anybody was really surprised that it was David who was the first one gone.
No, we haven't even spoke about him. So
I think that says it, though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because there was maybe the argument to say that David could have had a bit of a tween voting going his way, but I think the combination of the star power that all the nominees had, plus Kelly's sympathy story that inevitably she was going to have in those early stages.
Well, it was vote to save, wasn't it, as well?
Yeah.
Vote to save is always going to get rid of the boring characters. So.
Which always annoys me when they switch the vote to evict for the civilian version.
Well, I think the idea is that vote to save for the celebrity version will make them more money because they've got fans that will vote. They want the fans to vote for the people that they like, from being fans of them. And the civilian series is like kind of venting your hate kind of thing.
But as we mentioned, we sort of touched on, can anybody really think of anything interesting about David?
No, not really.
All he was Mr. Kellybrook. That was the only thing he had going for him at all in the show.
He was loud.
And I'm guessing he was pretty. And that's about it.
Really, very, very weak contestant. Honestly, one of the best first boots in terms of just how little he did. Honestly, he was the person who I wanted gone out of the entire 14, and I'm glad he did go. Although, the one thing I will say about David, and this is actually a little bit of trivia, is it's not the first time he'd ever been on Big Brother. Because if you remember, on Big Brother 12, there was a task which Harry had to do in the whole Say Yes task, where Harry had to pose for a gay magazine. And do you know who one of the gay models was?
Him.
David.
So, technically speaking, now Big Brother are recycling people that they've already had on the show.
Well, it's done that for years.
Yep.
Yeah.
But honestly, that's the only interesting thing I can think of about David. And I think that's just a sign of just how bad he was as a contestant.
So basically, he was your breathable plank of wood.
Well, yeah, well, with nice pecs. That was it. A plank of wood with pecs.
Alright, so plank of wood with pecs and possibly out. So you basically got an androgynous, muscular piece of wood.
Pretty much.
Alright, fair dues.
We've given David about 5 minutes more of interest than really he deserves. So we're going to be moving on to the face-to-face nominations. That's something new and exciting which we've never seen before.
Oh yeah, like introducing a mystery bloody celeb going into the civilian household. Woo!
I know. Let's put them all in shock suits.
That's going to be even. Oh yeah. Oh God and Bennett. Why shock suits?
I know. But I will say this face-to-face nominations was a little bit more interesting, and mainly because of I would say, two particular stories that came out of the face-to-face nominations. And the first one was Stephanie's nomination of Gary. And I don't know whether it was because, yes, Stephanie being American, she'd been in the scripted reality scene, was maybe trying to ham it up for the cameras, but she went in hard on Gary. To the extent it was very unpleasant to watch, in my opinion.
Yeah, but, actually shocking Gary, I would just really buckle if he just went, you feel anything?
No, Paul, they weren't in shock suits.
Oh, thank God.
Okay. Do you have any opinions on Stephanie's nomination of Gary? Carl?
Yeah, she went over the top. We realised again, initially you were starting to think, wow, why is she reacting so over the top to him? And then she kind of used her phobia or whatever as an excuse, which I don't understand because weren't all of them pretty bad at that, but nevertheless, yeah, she used that as an excuse to basically have a go at him for no real reason. Everybody ganged up at him. She was kind of one of the central ones of that, shouting at him like she was, and then when she came out, she felt justified because she was like, yeah, no, he's been edited to look like a kind old man. And then it was like, well, maybe, we know production are bad these days. Maybe that's the case. Maybe Gary is, or maybe it's the case of he's you wouldn't want to live with him, but, we have sympathy for him. But then we get to her, where the way she was on finale night on the bit on the side thing, it was like, okay, yeah, no, she is just a bitch.
Yeah.
I mean,
it was uncomfortable to watch, and I think Vicky as well. He was another one who went needlessly harsh on Gary.
Yeah, like where did he come from? Like his only storyline was an attempted showman that he was like, yeah, he's like one of those guys who hides behind the big bully who suddenly feels empowered because the rest of the group are going after somebody.
Oh, the stooge.
Yes.
And the other story that came out of this, which was it sort of brings us on to something which I sort of touched on earlier, which was oddly nominating Kelly and the reasons why he nominated her.
Because of the fact that he was a former boxing producer that he used to work with, and to tell you the truth, that was quite the very disturbing thing as it is. So, yeah.
But I found it really, because wasn't all the sort of reasoning that, what, you're now living as Kelly, I knew you as Frank, you're now living as Kelly, I think that you would be better off living as Kelly outside the house. Was it something, I think
he worded it wrong. He kind of came off as he's uncomfortable with Kelly in the house because he knew her as a man, which is fair enough, but it just kind of came across as like, oh dear.
I didn't like the fact that Audrey got a warning for it though, because it sort of brings me on to the same thing that we had with like Big Von's racism and Evander's homophobia, which is, I understand production wanting to be seen as trying to do the right thing, but they should have the trust in the audience to make these sorts of decisions for themselves.
But they don't, do they? Frickin' Victor says, functionally retards on Beyond the Side, and he gets 10 complaints to Ofcom. Like, there are people who literally watch these shows just to complain, because they're over politically correct and oversensitive. Like, and that's the reason that Big Brother has to be overly politically correct and oversensitive.
Yeah, I would just imagine if they're having a conversation one time, and then they just turned around to the camera and went, drink Pepsi. Just because,
honestly, production are that scared by Ofcom, by what happened with Shilpa, that if they get one complaint, they will do something about it.
But I honestly don't think that people would have made an issue about it if they didn't bring it up themselves. By bringing it up themselves, they're making it a bigger hoopla.
Well, Frank made it a big thing as well.
Which is bull.
He was like, I'm not going to talk to him anymore and all this.
What did you make of the fact that? What did you make of the fact that Audrey and Kelly were cast together in the same place? Because I thought that was a little bit cruel on production.
It made for a nice story, I think. Where it's basically him having to get past, and we all know that would be weird. And
yes.
Anybody who he's kind of like, no, I'd totally just accept him. It's like, no, you wouldn't. Don't lie. Yeah, it's everybody. That would be awkward for them, and there is that stage of having to get past that, and they did, and they made up, and they, were good friends and kind of allies from that point forward. So it was a nice journey for the buzzword for them to go on the show.
The dreaded buzzword. Yeah, I sort of enjoyed that themselves, but although I will think that because Kelly was one of the big stunt castings of that season, and then bringing in someone who knew Kelly, I mean, it was a good story, but it was quite cynical what they did.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But we get our nominees. Kelly, of course, is one of them. Kelly and Audrey, I should say, and they joined Frenchie, Gary, George, Leslie, and Stephanie on the nomination. Again, so many people get nominated. We sort of touched on that with Big Brother 15 on us, how there was never any sort of like one-on-one evictions. It was just, let's get everybody up because that makes more money.
That's just stupid.
Well, from a Channel 5 point of view, where they're trying to make money, it's a business for them. You can understand it from that sort of context.
Yeah, but when you start to treat your show like a business, then you're doing something wrong. Like the ski dude once said, treat your treat your show like a business, and you're gonna have a bad time.
I guess so. I guess you can argue that, but again, so we had so many people up. It was pretty much a given that Gary was going to be safe, and probably George as well. Were you surprised that Leslie went?
Not really, no.
Because it really surprised me as well, because as I mentioned before, Leslie was such a big, prominent character at that point in the show. Again, he a few days before, he'd been voted the star of the show. And it's quite alarming, actually, that a few days of being quiet after getting the warning, and Channel 5 see no reason to keep him around. I found that quite alarming from a production point of view, that somebody who was so big and so prominent is disposed of the moment they stop being interesting.
Basically, what happens when you set off a queen?
What about you, Carl? Leslie's eviction.
It was time. I think that there was lesser characters in there that added less, but I think his nastiness and that would have made him one of the biggest villains of the show had he stayed.
Yeah.
Arguably, but you can't deny he was great entertainment.
He was, again, but he was just too much in terms of how he went to people.
Yeah. Bitches be bitches.
And I think Leslie was as bitchy as they come, but I think he saw there's always a fine line, in my opinion, between being pantomime funny and just being nasty. And I think Leslie, he sort of straddled that, in my opinion, but just drifted a bit too much to the nasty side.
Straddled it? He almost friggin' rode it to the bloody whorehouse.
Well, let me put it this way. When Frenchie argued, there was no anger in her eyes. When he argued, there was like daggers.
Yes. I think that's a really good way to describe it. And I think that's... Because Frenchie, for me, is a good example of it. I wouldn't even call her a villain.
No.
I wouldn't even call her a woman. She's just basically a bloody rubber.
Well, we're going to have a great time discussing Frenchie when we get to it, because that's coming up, unfortunately. But I hate to say it, people, we are bringing up showmancers. We've got two of them which are on the run as we come into week 3. First of all, we got the Lauren and Ricky stuff.
Uh-huh.
And this really annoyed me, though, because we've had a lot of scripted reality participants come on these shows before, but it really annoyed me how blatant it was that the two of them were doing it for airtime. I mean, Ray Charles could have seen Lauren and Ricky were going to get together.
Yeah, it was the old thing. If he fancied her, he thought something might happen. She didn't want anything to happen in the house. He carried on in it. She got annoyed with it. Eventually, it got to the point that she was so sick of it that it was like, you know what? Nothing's ever going to happen ever, so just leave me alone.
But I don't understand as well why these scripted reality participants always look to try and form a showmans, because there's been plenty of them which have done these shows. We've had about 400 TOWIE contestants on it. They always get themselves into a showmans, and nobody ever cares.
Because it's Ricky. What else was he going to do? Like, what else was he going to add? What else would have got him votes? Nothing, because he has nothing.
Yeah. And I think, because I think a lot of the reason why these scripted reality shows are so popular is because they're all fueled on this sort of he said, she said sort of attitude. You've got social media fueling it, you've got the producers to one side doing that. Once you take all those outside influences away on those shows, you're left with some very fatuous, one-dimensional personalities. And the one thing they have going for them, the one thing that they resort to, because it's the only thing they know, is a showman's.
And also a random camera popping out of nowhere, staring at them while they're having a conversation. Just putting it out there.
Yeah. Anything more, Carl?
No, it got to the point that I just didn't care. I was just like, okay, whatever. I thought she was leading him on a bit, but I thought he was being delusional, and
it usually ends up going a little bit, south.
But along with that, we also had another. I wouldn't maybe not call it a showman's, but what did you make of George and Stephanie sort of trying to hook up together as a couple?
Oh, a little bit.
Because again, that was quite cynical. Because again, you got Stephanie from a scripted reality background, and George, who knows how the industry works because he's watched about 10,000 hours of it.
And again, anybody who watched the finale night shows knows pretty much how this was. Stephanie was looking for a showman, looking for a storyline. She liked George, hanging around with George, so she chose that. He was never in a million years going to have a chance with her, but he thought so because she was leading him on. She went out, he started doing it with other people. Then when it looked like she wasn't going to get any magazine deals, she turned on him.
So basically, a bitch.
Pretty much. Yeah, because it sort of brings up again another quite a bit of a problem with Channel 5, which is that we have these characters in this show who have the potential to be good pantomime over the top characters, but because of the way the shows run, where they try and encourage controversy, they push pantomime fun to nastiness. I mean, Stephanie again could have been a good villain, but she was too nasty for her own good to really enjoy that.
I do get that feeling, but she's just you don't make love for that. You make love for the reasons why you make love.
Oh, she was never going to touch him.
No,
she was going to have a few interviews, a few pictures, and then
probably get an OK magazine.
Mm-hmm. Probably hang around in a bag and usually get fed treats and. Have a little hat on every once in a while.
I'd love as well. Just to have a bit of a joke though, I'd love to think what if Stephanie and George did continue a relationship outside. What do you want to do tonight, George? Stay in and watch the telly.
It was just never going to happen, was it?
No. We can all dream though. We can get lucky sometimes. Other things that happened during that week, we had the blatant Under the Dome promotional task, which was Audley and James.
Oh.
But I mean, it was just so painfully obvious why they did that, though.
But one of them would win immunity. But my thing was what did they do to earn the right to compete for that? You're just putting them in there because they're the two that antagonize each other. But the person who wins gets immunity. So why couldn't you have had some sort of thing where the two people who won the task go in there, so it's like something that they've earned, rather than just against each other?
I'll just put everybody there. I mean,
why not give everybody a chance at that immunity? Why just those two?
Why not give everyone a knife for the chance of getting that immunity? That'll be more interesting. Besides which, like the show. Under the Dome, it still didn't make no fucking sense either. I'm a butterfly. Oh look, all this shit's happening. Aliens! Yep, this is a Stephen King thing. I'm out. Screw this shit. I'm out. All I just need to see now is a creepy clown, and that is it.
Well, we did have Gary Busey, so.
True.
Tim Curry.
I'll give you that.
Yeah. But along with that, though, we also get something that you touched on very early on, Carl, which was Claire's departure. Again, another illness-related one. Don't worry, there's no pregnancy rumours going around with this one.
Should hope not.
I hope not.
Yeah.
But Claire King.
Wow. She, again, second series in a row that somebody went out on illness where it's never ever happened before, and then 2 times in the same year. So there was some sort of bug in there, obviously, or something, I don't know. Or it was just the new excuse that they've come up with when somebody wants to walk. Conspiracies.
There was nothing that seemed to be hinting towards Claire wanting to walk.
No, it seemed real. So,
or it could be something from a Stephen King novel. Supernatural activity.
She was a person who you recognised. You're like, oh, okay. But again, it's another case of everybody was expecting her to be her character that she acted on television. Like, she's not that person. She's an actress. That's what she gets paid to do. And she was just a nice enough middle-aged woman, and she tried to have some fun, and she was drowned out by the bigger characters, and then she left.
Do you know what she was? She was Gillian Tailforth. She was pretty much exactly the same as Gillian Tailforth when she was in Celebrity 11. Again, another soap actress, known for being a bit of a bitch. People expect that from her, and they don't deliver.
Well, no, because that's her character. Those lines were written for her, you know?
Yeah, and they didn't actually realise that until.
It's not, you know, I don't freaking walk down the street, and if I see, you know, I don't know, David Prowse or something, I don't expect him to start force choking me. Do you know what I mean?
Darth Vader.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she was a nice lady. Don't get me wrong about that, but she wasn't good television.
I mean, to be honest, nah. I mean,
she was normal. She was just a normal middle-aged woman. I mean, the only time she ever spoke up was when Frenchie threw her dinner away, and she was like, "Oh, you selfish bitch." That's the only time I was like, "Did that sounded like Claire? Jesus, I've never heard her speak like that before."
We come to our next eviction though, and we've got 6 people up for this one, which is Frenchie, Gary, Kelly, Lauren, Ricky, and Stephanie.
Let me hear those music.
And we come to one of the big grievances I do have with this series. If there's one thing that I really do have a problem with, it's this eviction. And I know with shows like this, there's much about pre-show fan bases which help in this thing. But there is no way someone like Frenchie would get less votes to save than Ricky. There is something really fundamentally wrong with the voting audience when they consider Ricky more worthy of being a housemate.
I didn't understand this at all. I thought vote to save, Frenchie would be fine, and it's the same as Bianca in the normal series. It was just like the bigger characters, surely they'd vote for them. No. I think it's a case with that where did people just get together to block vote Ricky just to get Frenchie out?
Or as I call pulling a Liz Jones.
Yeah.
Again, a lot of pre-show will go into that as well, though. Because I mean, Ricky's on Geordie Shore, that gets unfortunately big ratings.
Oh fuck!
Yeah, but he's.
So that name rings a bell.
Would people really vote for him because they think this showmance is going to happen? Are they that gullible?
I think people are, though. I mean, they voted Helen the winner, didn't they?
Oh, you're right. Yeah, I do forget that somehow people like us watching the show is an anomaly, and most of them have like one brain cell.
Sad, isn't it? But we have to talk about Frenchie though, because honestly, Frenchie's up there as one of the great celebrity housemates, in my opinion. Just because of how bonkers she was.
Oh, and the fun times roll. Right. First off, when I first saw her, I thought to myself, dear Jesus, how Jesus on a unicycle, Christ. What the hell am I looking at? I mean, big fake boobs, big fake lips, latex to the gums. I mean, for God's sake.
You can't deny as a character though, she was great. I mean, she looked ridiculous, but They just fit Frenchie's personality, this ridiculous-looking woman with this big, ridiculous personality. It worked.
Yeah, it worked.
She was obviously very pretty when she was younger. She wanted to keep that when she was older. It's the oldest story in the book, and now she just kind of looks like a morphed version of herself. Yeah, but that was all you saw when she went in, and she was like, oh, okay, she's obviously a wild, crazy character, but you thought that you'd hate her just for that, and then as it went on, she just became so entertaining, just sort of like doing the most outrageous stuff that was like, you couldn't believe that somebody would have the balls to do that when you've got to live with these people. And she did backtrack a little bit after she did it all. She was like, oh yeah, sorry, I was wrong. But, and then she'd go right back to, she'd go at the crowd with booing her. She'd like, shut the fuck up, bitches.
But, I mean, that was brilliant.
She sums her up really. She was amazing. I really wish she could have stayed. She was one of the best characters to watch just because you couldn't predict what she was going to do next.
I wonder if you didn't moisturize her. Would she do the same thing as one of the villains from Doctor Who? Just explode or something like that. Because she stood out to me as just really fake. Not in a personal way, but not in a personality way, but really just looking at her makes me never mind.
Yeah. Although, as much as I do love Frenchie, though, do you think it's sort of cheating a little bit by production? Because Frenchie's done the reality TV circuit. She knows how these things work. It is a little bit of a contract that she's just doing what she's paid to do normally. I mean, it'd be much better if you had someone, I don't know, like a sportsman, acting like a manic Frenchie way.
No, that would probably be more entertaining. We find out that Jensen Button's really just, really bloody balmy or something like that.
Although I will stress as well, the production cheated a little bit in how they sold Frenchie to the audience, because it was implied she was like this veteran reality TV star. She was in Rock of Love, yet she was in Rock of Love 5 years ago.
She was a porn star.
Yes.
I'm not lying. She actually was.
I knew it. No way someone that normal can look that weird. Yes.
And you, Paul, have you seen John McCurrick?
Touché.
Good point. But yeah, I loved Frenchie, and I think the great thing as well is because we've had Frenchie on the show, if there's more series, production can now have the justification to get more of those sort of trashy VH1 celebrities to come in, and trust me, I've seen some of them. They're absolutely amazing, and Frenchie could arguably be the first of many.
We feel like we're fueling the worst of society by putting these people in there, but at the same time they're so entertaining. It's like, it's like two sides of it. It's like one side if you want, intelligent, good television, and the other side just wants to watch a car crash, and it's just that car crash element just takes over that little bit when you're watching this. You're just like, I can't help it. It's just so good.
It's like the fly. It's like a fly caught in one of those bug zapper things. It's so beautiful.
Yeah. We move on though from Frenchie's tragic eviction, and we go to Gary, the guidance counsellor.
Oh God.
He was amazing.
He was amazing in this time.
It was amazing throughout. Like, he took it so seriously, and he was sitting there going, "What do you feel about this?" But then, of course, the absolute best part was where all of a sudden he started shouting at James. Like, he was like, "You don't understand! You are this! You are that!" And then James got a tiff about it because everybody was ganging up on him, apparently. So.
Well, there was a lot of people that were kicking off about it because they were thinking, why should we be getting guidance counselling from the one person who needs it more than anything else?
He doesn't need counselling. He's got brain damage. No amount of counselling is going to fix his brain damage. You ignorant people.
Bringing back the clip from Family Guy. This is a guidance counsellor, ladies and gentlemen.
I think as well, one that you mentioned there with the attack on James. I don't know about you. I got the impression because Gary took a lot of grief from James, George, etc. I felt this was really the one time he felt confident enough to fight back, as it were. But I think because he had the guidance councillor task as he's basically mask, as it were, he wasn't going to get any sort of backlash for being aggressive. I felt this was really the one time that Gary really vented his frustration at, especially James.
Yeah, I mean, you know, James has been on his back. James has been on his back since day one. I would be pissed too if I would be doing the same thing Gary Busey did if I had the chance.
Did you ever get that impression, Carl, that a lot of Gary's frustrations, especially with James, was basically released through his guidance, especially when he started shouting?
Yeah, again, it's a case of all these people. Yes, he did. There was times where he was bad. He did do things that were wrong. He did say things that were rude. But then they would jump on him for the littlest things, and it just got to the point of, oh, chill the fuck out. And it was just like, eventually, finally, he had time to say something without somebody saying, no, I'm talking now.
My time to talk. Shut up. And it's my time to talk for real.
Yeah, pretty much. But now, after another round of face-to-face nominations, we get a double eviction which is coming up. It's Audley, Adele, Gary, Kelly, James, and Stephanie, which are nominated. And I don't think most people were surprised when Stephanie was the first one gone. And we've sort of touched on this earlier before when we brought up Stephanie, which is, yes, she was a villain. Yes, she arguably caused a bit of controversy, but she wasn't a nice person. She was too far the other way to be a good big brother villain, in my opinion.
Yeah, she was never around. She was always in bed. She occasionally poked her head up and had an argument with Gary and then went back to bed. And then, and she had a showmance that she was predicating in between.
Basically, rinse and repeat.
Yeah, pretty much. I think she was maybe a little bit more than that though, Stephanie, because she did cause controversy. She did cause controversy. She was central to a couple of the arguments on the show. I do think her time had run out there. She was central to an argument with Gary, and then after that she went to bed because she realised she was wrong.
Pretty much.
Were there any, aside from the Gary argument though, were there any sort of positive sides to Stephanie?
She was nicer than her brother.
Although it is very touch and go though. I think Stephanie essentially was a female Spencer, but I think Spencer maybe had a little bit more charm about him. You were a little bit okay, and I know there were different circumstances.
And he was also more savvy.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good word there, because I think there were times where maybe Stephanie did overstep the mark, and I think a lot of the reason why she overstepped the mark was because she wasn't as...
She was taking it personally.
Yeah. But we lose Stephanie, and then, arguably, quite overdue, because I always found it we end up losing Kelly, but I always found it quite funny with Kelly, because if you actually looked at the bookies' odds for that season, Kelly was always favoured to go every week, ended up surviving, always got the least Facebook likes for all the nominated contestants, and she just kept surviving, like this bottom feeder just kept going down the bottom, and finally her time ran out. But I always found that quite funny that people always expected Kelly to go at the first opportunity, and she just kept staying around.
But mind you, she looked a little bit like that woman, that dude from Benidorm, yeah. I mean, all we just wanted to hear is, and it says, "Right, you're out. Come on, out you go."
Wonderful Geordie accent, Paul.
Thank you.
Yeah. I always found Kelly quite a complex character, and I know Kelly gets a bit of a backlash, especially from the casual fans of the show. I don't hate her as much as what maybe some other people do. I do find it frustrating, especially with the pity party stuff, especially when she was always complaining about wanting to walk. One of the problems I had with Kelly, and I'm sorry if this comes across as offensive, and Carl can cut it out of the show if he thinks that, was if I knew somebody who was going through that process, I would expect them to embrace femininity a little bit more. I mean, this is the lifestyle they're going to be living with for the rest of their lives. And I never and I don't know if it was because it was early in the process or because of Kelly herself as a person, I never really got that impression from Kelly that she was fully embracing it. I mean, she was still talking about very masculine subjects, still carried herself in a very manly way. We were sold this idea that this was a woman going through a life-changing transition. All I saw was Frank Maloney in a dress.
Yeah, I think that obviously it's kind of it could be a thing where it's something, obviously it's the truth and it's what he's been going on for his whole life and this is the decision he's made, which is good. Or it could be a case of this is just kind of a strange midlife crisis. You never really got the sense of either of, I mean, obviously respect the decision that, she made, all that stuff, and all that stuff, but it just kind of became boring after a while. It was just like, that's all that she brought to the table, which was, it obviously can be sensitive to that, but, obviously there was the factor with her that the producers maybe shouldn't have put her in right after she had come out in public.
Yes. Because I remember this moment when I was watching the launch night when Kelly came out onto the stage and she sort of like hesitated, but she got to the top of the stairs, and as the doors opened, she hesitated, and there was like this close-up of her like doing this really deep exhale. It was like almost as if she wasn't ready for this big step.
It had this feeling of almost like at the moment that she came out in public, that the producers rang her up and almost sort of shoved her out there onto the stage to sort of capitalise on the headlines of the sex change.
And I read that Kelly was a very last-minute casting choice as well.
Yeah, it just felt a little like you're forcing this person to go through this thing on TV to capitalise on it, which really made me uncomfortable in that sense. And then of course she became miserable, and she just became sort of a drain on the show where it was just all about that or going, and then towards the end it was like it was everybody else's fault, and started having arguments with everybody, and it was just like this was just a depressing thing to watch, really.
Yeah, but then again you can make the argument, though. I know people say it's all about entertainment, it's not a social experiment anymore. There'd never been a character like Kelly in there, because especially somebody early in the transition process, you can maybe say Sam Brody, Big Brother 7.
Yeah, but there's documentaries out there. There's things that you can watch this. You don't have to bring down... This show's reputation is already in the gutter, okay? You don't need to make it any more trashy or exploitive than it already is, which is what it really came off as.
Unfortunately, that's not the case, considering the fact that it's still going. And from the looks of things, it's not going to stop.
I mean, is it going to get to the point that we're going to, we're going to have blind people? Oh, wait.
Yeah. What about wounded war veterans?
Yeah. We'll put them in there for a sympathy vote.
Hey, but on the other hand, though, from the looks of things, he actually got into the Victus Games. So
good, great for him. He was a great guy. I just didn't need him in my reality show.
No, good guy, but not very good television at all.
Yeah.
But we're transgressing there. We're talking about Steve from Big Brother 11. We're going to get back on track. I'm going to be talking about the customer complaints task.
Oh God.
Outside influence.
Outside influences, and there was a lot of elements of that, especially in the later stages of the show.
We said this on the last one. It's the exact same thing. It's entertaining on the night that you watch it. It's fun to watch, but then in terms of how it affects the show overall, it completely poisons the show. It changes. Obviously, how they're thinking about how they're behaving in there. Ricky, the whole kind of end game between him and Lauren was caused by this. It affects their behaviour. And, even though it's fun to watch them get, being told things what the public think, it ruins the whole isolation part of the show.
I did find it quite interesting, though, especially, again, we go back to Gary's treatment by the others. The way that the housemates reacted, especially to Gary's complaint, that was a bit too much, that, because I think, what was the name? I think it was Lauren or something like that, phoned in, said her issue that she had with Gary. And Dee and Adele were like laughing between each other, giggling, and it was
everybody else's complaints, it was like, oh, that person, they're an idiot, what do they know? Gary's complaint, yep, they're right.
You gotta admit, that's how I would have probably done my job.
But again, it was quite uncomfortable to watch, especially this sort of pack mentality that the others had around Gary.
Mm-hmm. Which is, again, you could, maybe a couple of things that he did. Again, yes, not everything, and especially the way that they overreacted to everything. They can't just say, no, Gary, don't do that. Just go in.
Such as the overreaction to his supposed nudity.
Yeah, that was crazy. But at the same time, Dee especially, like, she was shrieking like a banshee. Like, you think that he had, like, walked up to her and started flashing her.
Basically went out full-blown naked and just...
No!
He wasn't even full-blown naked, he was readjusting his gentleman's and ended up pulling his trousers down to do so. And it was this massive uproar. It was almost as if he'd killed someone in there, that sort of hysteria about it. I mean, yeah, Gary was in the wrong for coming in like that. That's not how people should behave. But at the same time, though, you know what Gary's like. You know he's got problems. You should arguably have a bit more tolerance to him in regards to that, and they just weren't tolerant enough.
Yeah, but I've got problems, and I know when it's not appropriate to actually go out.
But he doesn't know. He's a 70-year-old man with brain damage. That's kind of my thing. It's like, can you blame production for putting somebody in there? Yes, you can. But at the same time, the people who are in there should have had more respect for that and should have understood that he doesn't think things the same way that you do.
Imagine if this was a care home, and the likes of Dee, George, and James, etc., were the carers, and they behaved that way, treating someone like Gary.
Or imagine if they were dealing with somebody with autism per se, and they were like, oh my god, this person, they're so irritating.
Yeah, I could gather that.
It's kind of like, you don't understand. You don't understand. Like, literally, there is nothing, he can't take a pill and just become normal. Do you know what I mean? It's like...
Yeah.
Idiots.
Yeah, pretty much. It frustrated me. And you sort of touched on it there, which was Dee's emergence as a villain in the show, because, I don't know, I sort of got the impression that before this, Dee was just sort of this sort of middling, like this sort of middle of the road, sort of, I wouldn't say wholesome, that's not the right word, but she was sort of like the house mum. And as I said, yet by this point, she really begins to emerge as the main antagonist, which I found quite surprising, because you would have expected that Dee to be so prominent earlier on in the show because she was the big stunt casting.
Well, it was the one that I was speaking about, really, when I spoke about, I mean, obviously Stephanie and George as well, but she was the main one of, she, in any other series, probably would have won, despite the controversy, but because of, her character and how she was, things like that, but because she was so overly negative towards Gary for no particular reason that we could see, again, that could all be editing, but it just kind of came across as she just overreacted to him because, I don't know.
I mean, I can understand it being frustrated living with Gary Busey. I can imagine the patience being tested, but there was no need, in my opinion, to react in the way that Dee was.
No.
We move on to the next eviction. It's a double eviction, this one, and we end up losing the two members of our showmans of the series, which is Ricky and Lauren. We're going to start with Ricky first, where, what can you say? There's just nothing to say.
Said it all earlier. Goodbye.
He's a plank. He's just, a bronze plank.
It's got to get to the point, surely, where we've exhausted these people. Like the cast of Geordie Shore, it doesn't have anybody else to offer.
I'm just really surprised we still have bloody Geordie Shore. Why won't it end? Just listen to me, MTV. No one wants to watch you anymore.
It gets good ratings though, Paul. It gets good ratings, and again, it's you might not personally agree with it, but Channel 5 as a business, they want to try and attract the biggest audience that they can. It's a scripted reality environment, so on paper they should nor what makes good television, so I understand it from their point of view. But I mean, you compare Ricky, who was such a irrelevant character, and then Charlotte, who, yeah, I didn't particularly agree with everything that Charlotte did, but she was entertaining. Yeah. The only really two things that I can really think about with Ricky is, in the showmance with Lauren, and when Lauren ended it from her part, Ricky did get very self-righteous, self-pompous, almost as if he was expecting, because he was the big alpha type, he expected Lauren to fall for him and got very bitter when she didn't.
Yeah.
So it's not like this Kirk
It's
North
like,
Cross.
oh, how dare she? She's been leading me on this whole time. What a bitch, that harlot.
That's sort of like Kirk Norcross, no means yes sort of attitude, which I didn't really like. And then there was his random hatred of Audie, which I just found really funny how, as he self said, there's one person I really didn't have time for, and you're thinking, oh, it's going to be Gary, because everybody hates Gary. And then he goes on to this massive rant about how much he hates Audley, and we just never saw any of that.
No, maybe it's stuff we didn't see, but at this point, Audley had become kind of Gary's defender, so maybe that was it.
Probably.
I wouldn't bloody, dude, if I was getting bodyguarded by bloody Audrey Harrison, I wouldn't argue back. I would have let him go. Don't worry, little dude. You'll be safe now. Jesus Christ.
To be fair, being a bodyguard for Gary Busey would suit Audie Harrison, because all he ever did was block.
Oh, you son of a bitch.
I'm a boxing fan, don't worry. And we come to Lauren as well. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb, and I know you two might not agree with me. Lauren might probably be the best Harry contestant we've had so far. Yeah, maybe that's not saying much because the standard has been quite poor, but I think she did have a little bit more than the likes of Amy Childs or Mario Falcone, etc. Because, yeah, she was a bit vacuous. Yeah, she wasn't really that interesting, but she had a little bit of an edge to her, I felt.
Are you sure his name was Mario Falcone and not Mario Falcone? Sorry, Gotham joke. Lauren was quite nice. I enjoyed her. She was fine. I mean, obviously all she had going for her was the showmance, but she was a nice enough girl. And I like that she stuck up for the fact that, you know, she doesn't have to be stick thin to being good looking, which I didn't even think she was. Her weight was an issue. It was like, really? People? Okay. And then, you know, I saw her on the newsstand naked the other day, so.
Oh, God. What's the name?
Lauren
Sosha.
Yeah.
Okay. Hang on a sec.
I'm from The Only Way is Essex.
Fuck. Why?
Again, big rating show. Don't know how much of that will happen when they're on ITV now, but
you know what's gonna happen at the end of it all. It's just gonna be The Only Way is Big Brother Geordie Shore. It's just going to end up like that.
Or it's going to die and be remembered as the Channel 5 era was the era that kept beating that dead horse until that dead horse was a pulp.
No offense, but the horse has turned into pulp. It's now getting salted testicles for horse burgers. I thank you, but still, oh God.
Yeah. So we end up losing Ricky and Lauren, conveniently double eviction. I do love though Dee's reaction to the two of them going. I have to point that out before we move on, because there was that great moment where it was like, first person eliminated is Ricky, no, and Lauren, no.
It's like, oh my God, how dare!
Funny, especially when
how dare you not like the people I like? What's wrong with you?
I am a rebel. I like who I like.
One of us, you got to remember, ladies and gentlemen, D, criticising us for our eviction choices. But we move on to finale night, a 6-person finale night. I've never been the biggest lover of having that many people in my
No, and this was the worst example of it. It's been rushed in the past, but this one was like 30 seconds. Okay, we've run out of time. Let's get the next person out. 30 seconds. And I was like, Jesus Christ.
It was too much. I always think that 4, maybe 5 at a stretch is probably the ideal amount, but I think when you get 6 and 7 in there, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, it was too fast. There was no pageantry. There was no event of it. It was just like, okay, well, let's just get them all out one by one and talk to them.
Bring in the next lot.
We move on to our sixth place contestant, which is somebody who we haven't really touched on that much, which is Adele. There's not really much to say to her. I mean, she seemed like a pleasant girl. I mean, yeah, there was some nasty stuff with Gary, but she certainly wasn't as bad as what the likes of Dee, James, and George were.
No, she was fine. She was nice enough. She had a kiss with George on the last night, which was, so her storyline kind of developed after she came out of the house. It was like, Jesus, why couldn't this have happened in there? Christ. You become interesting after you leave. The whole thing where, Stephanie overreacted and called her an Irish slut and all this, and it was like, in the background, on the side, it was like, oh my god, stay on this, this is far more entertaining than the finale was. But yeah, she was nice enough. Yeah, she was a nice woman who, did at least try with Gary, and then there was times where he was a complete dick to her, don't get me wrong. I'm a Gary defender, but he was a dick to her a few times, and she eventually was just like, you know what, screw it, which is fair enough.
Yeah. Although she did fall victim to the traditional 90s pop star problem, which is, you've had your big hit, that's all you're known for, because she's just going to hammer it and hammer it.
Well, this, for her storyline was, I'm upset because I'm a divorce, so now I'm not going to make any friends. Okay.
Were there any great Adele moments that come to mind for you?
When she left.
Which I think's
I just kept seeing the dent in her nose.
Most exciting thing about Adele Lynch, the dent in her nose.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And of course, as they're rushing them all out, she ends up leaving at the same time as our fifth place contestant, Dee.
Yeah, she was obviously put in there for, the topicalness. Thought she was going to be kind of the big mama character of the house. She became way too bitter towards Gary, and it made her disliked, and she just became overly negative, and that was that. Goodbye.
What do you think the production expected of Dee? Because I knew, of course, being from Benefit Street, what sort of character do you think they expected it to be? Was she supposed to be this great woman of the people? Was she supposed to be what she was?
I think their hope was that she would be the most loved character. Her story would be, she came from obviously being on a Channel 5 show that was all about benefits. She signed up to this show, and then she walks out with all the money from this show, and now she's a made woman and a celebrity, and it's a great story kind of thing.
It's quite strange in how a lot of the perceptions of people in the show were basically turned on the head, because you would have expected Dee to be the beloved protagonist, same with George.
And that's part of the fun of at least some elements of this social experiment still exist somewhere, where it's fascinating to see how if you take that one element of Gary out of the show, and it was a completely different show, and these people probably would have been completely different people.
And it is really fascinating. I totally agree with you there. Do you have any opinions on Dee, Paul?
Good character on the show. Not as loved. Still don't like the fact that the one person who's representing the people with benefits is someone who was basically, hair.
Yeah, if you could imagine in your head sort of the stereotypical doll-dosser. Yep.
Because wasn't that right saying as well that
you won't get paid with your benefits? I don't know. I'm just gonna get myself some propane.
Well, wasn't one of the reasons why Dee was on benefits because she was claiming for depression?
Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
Because I think so. Because
I didn't actually watch the show she was on.
That was one of the reasons why there was so much controversy about her casting as well, was because she was supposed to be off sickness leave because she was considered depressed, and yet she's going in an environment like the Big Brother house.
Fair enough.
Yeah. I wasn't the biggest lover of Dee as a person. I don't particularly agree with the reasons why she was cast, but those are the breaks. And now we come to fourth place, George. Now, if there was one part of Launch Night which I really did like, it was George coming in fourth, because I had this awful fear that George was going to win, and it would have really put a dampener on the series if he had, in my opinion, because arguably on paper, George is the typical, especially in the Channel 4 era, he would have walked it.
True. But, again, this is not the Channel 4 era, and the only thing that actually came out of that was basically, someone from Channel 4 basically almost winning it.
Well, it's a case of two things. It's the vote to save, and because the audience has shrunk. So there's less gullible people voting.
Pretty much.
Yeah. But again, I felt George fell into the same sort of trap as what Dee and James was that there was almost this self-righteousness and this belief that because they came in with the beloved fan base, there was this expectation of, I can do what I want and everyone's going to love me, especially because especially Dee and George both had the status of being working class, one of the people, as it were. Because there was a disagreement with Gary. I don't think it was ever shown on the highlights show, but there was a disagreement which really symbolised that for me, which was, Gary said something along the lines of, to George, he said something along the lines of, are you sure the British public are going to like that? I tell you what, George, not George. I tell you what, Gary, I am the British public. I know what we want. Again, it was that self-righteousness, pomposity about it, and that didn't reflect well on George. And also the way he jumped from Stephanie, and then he jumped to Adele later on. That sort of showman's jumping. He was quite cynical in that regard. I wasn't a big George fan.
Hey.
In a different show.
Yeah. But I think the thing was as well though, was because once now we had George out the way, regardless of what happened, regardless of which of the three won, we were going to get a good winner, in my opinion.
Audley, I would have said, was alright, but I don't think he should have won.
Well, we'll get to Audley when we get to him, because we're going to be discussing third place James. Now, James is a really difficult character for me to judge. It's sort of in a similar way, similar to Stephen, where that on paper you have a lot of characteristics which should make him this great, love-to-hate, ridiculous character. And there were moments of that, considering himself the Brad Pitt of the dancing world, which I always think is a great statement. But there was just a bit too much negativity that you couldn't really feel confident to say, oh, I love him, he's hilarious. Someone said it best, I think it was on Survivor Sucks, someone said it absolutely best. He's Rex without the charm.
Yeah, he was just so arrogant and so, this is how it is, I don't care what anybody thinks of me, I'm amazing, and in England we do this, and you Americans, screw you, because you're wrong and loud, and...
Stupid.
Do you think, to try and defend James so much, do you think that maybe a part of his personality is from the fact he is from quite a competitive background?
Yeah, and I think, possibly, and I think it also, again, but you have to say he was fired from that background for being too
controversial.
Yeah, not controversial. What's the word? Confrontational.
Yeah. What about you, Paul? Were there any sort of James moments that come to mind for you?
The fact that he actually knew how the actual system worked was actually pretty impressive. But again, that didn't actually help him out, and well, it shows really.
I mean, I don't hate him as much as what other people do. I have to be honest there, but I would never say I'm a James fan. But I do understand why there were some people who did like him.
True.
But we come to our final two, and it's Audley versus Gary. And Audley ends up being the runner-up. Gary is voted as the winner and shows pretty much no reaction whatsoever.
Yes, that was the most, when he basically, that was the most unpredictable moment of Big Brother that I've ever seen in my life.
It was fun, yeah. It was like his reaction wasn't yes, it was yay, okay, I won, oh cool.
It's just basically him just going, nah, fuck it. Okay, I'm a winner. Fuck it, I'm out.
And Audley's like, oh, you won, man, you won. And it's like, yeah, all right.
What?
Nice.
That's great. That's great.
And then they almost did kind of a forced, yay! Oh my god.
I would just really buckle at this point in time. He just realizes that he's just basically one big celebrity Big Brother and just went, holy shit! Oh my god, I won! I won!
Oh, well, like he's just sitting quietly alone in his house 2 weeks later and he realises.
That sort of thing, aye.
Or like his wife's like, oh yeah, you just got the money through. It's like, oh, this is more than they said they were going to pay me. It's like, yeah, because you won. A what? Oh!
I won! Yay! Hey, Gary Busey in the mirror. Guess what I did? I won. That's good for you, buddy.
Can we get through to talking about Audley though?
Sure.
If you want to. Because I have to be honest, yes, Audley is maybe not the most exciting person in the world, but he was a nice person in my opinion. He was definitely the most genuinely nice person in the series in my opinion.
He stood up for Gary. He stood up for what he believed in. He was the right. He handled situations well. This thing with Frank was handled very well by him. He was just a genuinely nice stand-up guy. He had his moments, but for the most part, he was just kind of there as sort of the every guy who was just kind of shaking his head at insanity that was going on around him.
In my opinion, he's the perfect example of a runner-up contestant for me because a nice person, but someone who doesn't win. I think
he was like the Gary supporting act kind of thing. Yeah.
If Audley had won, I think there might have been a bit of a backlash against him, but I think finishing as the
yeah.
For being a nice person. It's like Adam from Big Brother 13.
Which Adam? Are we talking Spooky Eyes Adam or the other Adam?
We're talking about Big Brother 13 Adam.
Oh, right.
The gang there.
Oh?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Saying that though, but if there was one thing that really came across with Audley in there, you can tell why he was never a good boxer. He just does not have that killer instinct in him.
Oh, bless him. He's like this. He's like Ken from Fist of the North Star.
But I think as well, if you look at the contrast, because we've had two boxers which have been in the Celebrity Series this year, and think about how different Evander was to Audley. Because I think a lot of people were maybe put off by boxers in reality shows because of Evander. I think Audley has arguably done them a lot of good, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, because Evander was, he used to be Mr. Megabooks, he used to be really successful, and now he's kind of fell down to earth, and this is part of it, whereas I think Audley is more kind of grateful to still be a celebrity, really.
Yeah, but don't try and make a comeback, Audley, please.
It's like I'm going to have a rematch with...
I'm going to have a rematch with...
And Frank's going to be in my corner. It's like, oh, no, oh dear.
I'm going to have a rematch with bloody Gary Busey.
Trust me, Paul, the last thing Gary needs is more blows to the head. But now we come to Gary, because, again, normally you never really get anything good about the housemates being in the house by themselves, but I have to say, just those quirks about Gary just coming out of the house was just brilliant, because there was that great moment when Emma comes to the house and says, Gary, you are the winner, please leave. And Gary just sits there just like...
There it is.
Now? Leave the house, you have won. What, you want me to leave now?
Get out! Fuck off!
He was probably still wondering where his 3 questions were.
Oh God, Gary, we've said it all throughout this thing. He was amazing. He was amazing to watch. Don't think I want to live with him, but he was amazing to watch. People should have been more sensitive to the problems that he had. They weren't. They were not. They were. Oh, they all ganged up on him, and it gave him the show. So, well done, everybody.
I have to say though, Emma certainly earned her paycheck trying to do that interview.
I would just imagine, the mental image of her, the mental image inside her head, talking to Gary Busey, trying to get that trying to get an interview out of him. He's just
Well, like-
basically going, oh, God.
But Emma would ask these really quite simple questions, and Gary would just go on these like 10-minute monologues about
Something completely different.
which I just thought was just brilliant.
And he gets this look in her eyes like, oh my god, the show's gonna go off the air.
I think he only managed to ask about 2 questions. If there was one thing though that's maybe a bit off-putting about Gary winning, I do support Gary winning because he was hilarious, was his winner story. I'm the sort that thinks about winner storylines and themes of the show, etc. A bit too much like that. But I got the impression with Gary, his winner storyline was pretty much exactly the same as Jim's from the Celebrity 13.
Yeah, but these things, they don't write this stuff, so you can't really help it.
But yeah, it was the out of touch older male who ends up being ostracised, ends up becoming an underdog, and ends up winning on the back of that. Even in the fact that the main antagonist was the bitter middle-aged woman.
Yeah.
And
Except I think Jim was an everyman really, whereas Gary is Gary. I think it's different in the fact that I think with Jim it was his reputation, with Gary it was his quirks.
Yes, I think that's a really good way to look at it. But we come to assessing the series now. Just going to digress here, but on Celebrity 13, in the best bits, they end up talking about. We'll cut that out actually.
Well, they end up talking about...
No, we're going to cut that bit out.
Alright.
So now we come to assessing the series because Jim Davidson, of course, asked us in the diary room, try and follow this, and they came really close to it with this Celebrity series. This was a really good quality show, in my opinion.
The casting was actually pretty good. There was a lot of weird and quirky and Frenchy characters in there. So, yeah, I think it was an alright series.
I'd probably go, it's either top of my second tier or bottom of my top tier, in my opinion. It's that, I think it's that good of a series, in my opinion. I think the characters were good, I think the drama came, but again, one of the things that really makes me highlight it, it frustrates me that we can have 2 great celebrity series, and then the civilian version just goes to pot.
I would just...
Well, again, that's half of that is just the focus and the production and things like that. But nevertheless, I think that this was a good, despite my criticisms of production things like that. For the most part, it was just insanely good, just because the characters, especially the first half.
Yes.
You tuned in every night because it was like, what the hell are these people going to do next?
I think those first few days, especially when Leslie was on top form, absolutely amazing.
When they had that clip of what was going to happen the next night with the shorts, it was like, what the hell? And then they showed the whole show, and it was like, no, that was just one of 5 arguments that happened that day. Like, what?
Definitely an amazing series, and one which, unfortunately, I don't feel will get the praise it deserves because of it being a summer celebrity series, Channel 5, etc. But trust me, if you haven't watched Celebrity 14, please do. I really do recommend it. But I think that's all we've got time for today's show. I've really enjoyed talking about Celebrity 14, and I hope you've enjoyed listening to us from wherever you are. Please don't be afraid to contact us on our Facebook and Twitter pages. You can see them on the screen before you. Entering the 21st century, Twitter.
Woohoo!
Yeah. But I've really enjoyed it. I hope you two lads have enjoyed it as well.
Yeah.
We did.
You've been listening to Big Brother's Big Archive. I've been Carl Bainbridge. That's been Carl Dutton.
See you next time.
That's been Paul Barron.
Gary Busey!
And we will be joining you again when we talk about Celebrity Big Brother 3. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.
That's
There you go.
That's a jump, isn't it? Jeez. From...
Are we pulling a Microsoft right now? Fuck 9, let's just go to 10.
Yeah, what was I going to say? It's, because, the last retrospective one we did was Big Brother 6.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be Celebrity 3, which is the John McCrick series.
Oh, Lord.
Oh, God.
Mind you, though, I'm not... Yeah, I'll probably discuss it with Joe as well. I don't think it's worthwhile us doing the first 2 Celebrity versions.
No, no, I don't.
Because they were only about 6 days long and they weren't great.
That's the fact it has John McKirk in, and basically, hello, target practice.
I like John. I have to be honest. I do. Look, John is a disgusting man. I can't deny he's a disgusting man, but he's very clever in my opinion. He knows what's going on, and especially when you see him on the side. Yeah, he can raise his mouth and play up to the cameras a lot, but he's more often than not right on the ball of what the public's thinking.
Yeah.
Right, I think I remember he was on some stand-up thing, and he basically wanted to get revenge on some a comedian who gave out his phone number. So he turned around and gave the comedian's phone number out, and everyone was chanting along. Now, repeat after me: 462-354-443.
Mind you as well, I can't hate John because one of the first things that John asked on his eviction interview was, did Newcastle win in the FA Cup? So I can't hate him for that reason.
Oh no, you can't hate him. Mind you, you can't hate him when he shows. Well, oh god, you can't hate him when you see him in his underpants, and but you can't hate him for being.
Unfortunately, that's going to be one thing we're really going to have to discuss.
You know what he reminds me of? He looks like a womble.
Shaved womble. Aye, brilliant. Brilliant.
That's all I think when I see him.
One of
the great ones I heard when talking about John McCurrick was, I do the Big Brother attractiveness ranking, and he always finishes last. And someone said, lol at John, he looks like he smells of cabbage.
Okay.
Oh, God.
Alright, I will speak to you guys in a bit.
Yep, get to work trying to edit that down.
Will do.
I'm sure you'll do a great job with it though, Carl.
Alright, catch you later.
See you later, Carl.